You think today's motors are wild? Back then, outboards were unhinged. Some were underrated, some were dangerous, and a few were so fast they scared their own owners. But here's the twist. The real monsters weren't the ones you expect. Let's dive in. If the 2000s had a heavyweight champion, it was the Mercury Racing 300X. This thing wasn't just fast, it was a menace. A 3.0-liter, carb-fed two-stroke V6 that routinely dynoed above 310 horsepower, even though Mercury politely pretended it made 300. Yeah, sure, tell that to the guys running 100+ miles per hour on river rockets. What made the 300X special was how alive it felt. You didn't just throttle it, you unleashed it. Bass boats, STVs, Allisons, and Hydrostreams would practically levitate once this thing hit the power band. Owners still swear it didn't accelerate, it teleported. And the sound? Pure chaos? The good kind. But the funniest part, the 300X wasn't refined at all. It drank fuel like it was trying to win a bet. It melted inexperienced drivers, and it absolutely refused to behave politely at idle. Yet none of that mattered, because the moment you pushed the throttle forward, every flaw vanished under a wall of two-stroke fury. To this day, the 300X has a cult following so intense you'd think it's a religion. People trade them like rare artifacts, polish them like trophy wives, and defend them like family. And honestly, fair enough. In the 2000s, nothing, and I mean nothing, pulled like a Mercury 300X. When Yamaha dropped the F350 V8 in 2007, the boating world basically paused, blinked twice, and asked, "Wait, a V8 outboard?" Yes, Yamaha really bolted an entire Lexus-sized 5.3-liter V8 onto a transom. Suddenly, every center console looked like it was wearing weightlifting plates. This wasn't just the biggest outboard of the decade. It was the most powerful production outboard in the world at launch. Offshore guys went insane. Triple F350 setups became the new flex. And quad F350 rigs? Those were the marine equivalent of bringing a tank to a snowball fight. Despite its size, the F350 wasn't some clumsy giant. It was smooth, brutally torquey, and pushed 30-foot boats like they owed it money. For heavy offshore hulls, it was a dream. You could load your boat with gear, coolers, a small village, and the F350 would still yank it onto plane like it was nothing. But let's be honest, this engine was massive. Maintenance techs joked you needed a step ladder just to insult it. And those early exhaust corrosion issues? Oof. The F350 definitely had its diver era. Still, none of that changes the truth. This was the muscle moment of the 2000s. It made offshore boats feel like sports cars. It made competitors panic. And it made buyers say, "I'll take 2 or 3. The 2000s were full of loud, flashy engines, and then Suzuki quietly walked in with the DF300 and stole the spotlight without even raising its voice. Released in 2006, this was the world's first 300 horsepower four-stroke, and nobody saw it coming. People expected Suzuki to build something sensible. Instead, they showed up with a 4.0-liter, big block V6 that ran smoother than most car engines. What really shocked boaters was how fast it was. Four strokes back then weren't supposed to be quick. They were supposed to sip fuel, hum politely, and lose drag races to 2 strokes. But the DF300 pulled like a gym bro on creatine. Heavy offshore hulls suddenly had new life. Big walk-arounds and deep Vs gained 3 to 5 miles per hour overnight. And the reliability? Classic Suzuki. Owners ran these things for thousands of hours and bragged about it like they had discovered immortality. Even mechanics admitted they didn't see them often, which either means they were insanely reliable, or mechanics were avoiding extra work. The DF300 wasn't the loudest, lightest, or flashiest engine of the 2000s, but it was the most grown-up flex, the engine you bought when you wanted power and peace of mind. And in a decade full of screaming two-strokes, Suzuki proved a four-stroke could be just as fast, without all the drama. The Evinrude E-Tech 300 arrived in the late 2000s like a rebellious teenager kicking down the door of a four-stroke family meeting. Everyone said two strokes were finished, obsolete, done. Evinrude said, "Hold my spark plugs," and dropped a 3.4-liter direct injection monster that could hit 300 horsepower without breaking a sweat. What made the E-Tech 300 special wasn't just speed, it was instant speed. You touched the throttle, and the boat moved like it had somewhere urgent to be. No hesitation, no drama, no deep inhaling sound, just clean, violent, immediate power. Base boats and performance pontoons suddenly had this hilarious ability to launch passengers into new zip codes. Evinrude also bragged that the E-Tech needed no dealer service for 3 years. Boat owners heard that and instantly fell in love. Less maintenance, more throttle time. It's basically every boater's fantasy. And reliability? When maintained properly, these engines went thousands of hours. But when neglected, let's just say E-Tech owners have stories. Loud stories. Stories with replacement powerheads. But nobody can deny this. In terms of raw, punchy, attitude-filled speed, the E-Tech 300 was one of the last great two-stroke legends. A final salute to the era of smoke, scream, and chaos. Honda never tried to be the loudest kid in the outboard playground. They never built a 300, never dropped a V8, never made something that scared fishermen. Instead, they built the BF250 and quietly created one of the sneakiest fast four-strokes of the 2000s. On paper, it didn't look wild. A calm, civilized 3.5-liter V6 based on Honda's automotive engineering. Quiet as a whisper, smooth as filtered coffee, and cleaner than your search history. But get it on the water, and the BF250 went from polite to dangerous. Those deep V offshore boats, suddenly gaining speed they weren't even designed for. Family bow riders, accidentally beating base boats. Nobody expected a Honda to be this quick, and that's what made it fun. The best part, you could push this engine hard, really hard, and it just smiled back. It didn't complain, it didn't overheat, it didn't explode dramatically like certain high-strung options we won't name. It simply delivered speed, quietly, respectfully, like a hitman in a suit who removes his sunglasses before ruining your weekend. And the reliability? Peak Honda. These motors ran so trouble-free that mechanics hated them because they didn't get enough work. The BF250 wasn't flashy, but make no mistake, in the 2000s, it was one of the smoothest, stealthiest speed machines you could bolt to a transom. Tohatsu isn't usually the first name people throw around when they think fast outboards. Affordable? Yes. Reliable? Yes. Capable of launching a flats boat into orbit? Surprisingly, also yes. The TLDI 250, their top-end direct injection two-stroke of the 2000s, became a cult favorite among people who cared more about acceleration than brands. What made the TLDI 250 special was its weight, or lack of it. This thing was light, really light. When you bolted it on a flats boat, aluminum rig, or go-fast skiff, the power-to-weight ratio turned stupid in the best way. Whole shot performance became comedic. You'd throttle up and the boat basically jumped like it had been slapped. Sure, it didn't have the prestige of Mercury Racing or the offshore muscle of Yamaha. But Tohatsu did something clever. They made an engine that didn't need 300 horsepower to feel fast. The 250 TLDI was snappy, responsive, and willing to climb into the higher speed ranges that would embarrass heavier four-strokes of the era. Did it have quirks? Of course. It liked clean fuel, fresh plugs, and the occasional stern pep talk. But owners loved how cheap they were to run and how shockingly fast they felt on the right hull. The 2000s had many big names, but the TLDI 250 proved the underdogs could bite too hard. Nissan Marine wasn't exactly known for world domination. Most people remember them for small, reliable kickers or dinghy engines, not for something that could actually move. But the 225 TLDI changed that reputation instantly. What made it cool was how deceptive it was. You'd walk up to a boat rigged with a Nissan outboard and think, nice, practical, economical. Then the owner would hammer the throttle, and the whole boat would snap forward like it had been insulted. The 225 TLDI pulled way above its rating thanks to its lean weight and punchy two-stroke direct injection system. Its favorite playgrounds? Fast aluminum rigs, river sleds, and lightweight skiffs, the kind of boats where every kilogram matters and every horsepower counts. Pair it with a well-balanced hull, and you had a silent assassin that could outrun more famous brands without ever bragging about it. Was it perfect? No. Nissan Marine exited the outboard market completely after 2014, making these engines even more uncommon today. But back in the 2000s, the 225 TLD was the bargain rocket people still whisper about. The kind of engine that passed you quietly and left you checking your rigging for excuses. Italy isn't exactly the first country people think of for high-speed outboards, unless you count the espresso-powered scooters. But the Selva Killer Whale 250 changed that. Built in Europe, tuned for performance, and carrying a name that sounded like it wanted to fight you. This engine became a favorite on European RIBs and sport boats. Selva used Yamaha powerheads during this era, but tuned them differently, giving the Killer Whale a sharp, aggressive throttle response that felt more Mediterranean sports car than offshore cruiser. The engine was light, punchy, and perfect for the quick wave-skimming RIB culture dominating Italy, Spain, and Greece. And yes, people laughed at the name at first. Killer Whale? Really? But after it started passing boats that were supposedly faster, nobody laughed anymore. The Italians were cooking. The best part was how versatile it felt. On a lightweight RIB, it pushed speeds into the 50s and 60s with ease. On sportier fiberglass hulls, it held plane at low speeds, but also delivered that satisfying top-end surge when you buried the throttle. Sure, it never reached Mercury Racing celebrity status, but the Selva Killer Whale did something arguably cooler. It proved that even boutique European brands could join the 2000s horsepower war with style. Mariner was like Mercury's quieter twin brother. Same DNA, same muscles, just less screaming about it. But in the early 2000s, the Mariner 250 EFI reminded everyone that being quiet doesn't mean being slow. This engine was a classic 3.0-liter two-stroke EFI beast, based heavily on Mercury's proven performance platforms. On base boats, this thing was downright hilarious. You'd see a gray Mariner on a transom and think, "Oh, that's nice. Must be a family setup." Then it would fire up, cough out that two-stroke growl, and send the boat sliding across the lake like someone spilled oil under it. The 250 EFI had torque everywhere. Whole shot, brutal. Mid-range, sticky. Top end, enough to embarrass modern four-strokes. And because it wasn't as hyped as its Mercury-branded counterpart, the 250 EFI became a great sleeper pick. Cheaper, quieter in the community, and just as capable of pushing rigs to 70 to 80 miles per hour when dialed in with the right prop. Was it thirsty? Absolutely. This engine could drink fuel faster than a guy on vacation drinks pina coladas. But owners didn't care. They bought it for one reason: speed. And in the 2000s, the Mariner 250 EFI delivered exactly that. No apologies given. By the early 2000s, Johnson was nearing the end of its historic run, but it wasn't going out quietly. The brand released its final DI two-strokes, 250 and 300 horsepower variations, and these engines came out swinging. Strong mid-range grunt, clean direct injection, and that classic Johnson attitude made them instant favorites for boaters who weren't ready to give up on the old guard. These engines were wild on bass boats and surprisingly strong offshore. The acceleration felt old school, punchy, responsive, and willing to throw you backward if you weren't paying attention. Compared to the emerging four-strokes, the Johnson DI line was lighter, snappier, and just more fun. But there was also a bittersweetness to them. Everyone knew Johnson's days were numbered. BRP was shifting attention to Evan Roode, and the Johnson name would soon become history. That made these engines feel like the last blast of rock and roll before the lights came on. Still, performance was never the issue. Rig one properly, and it would push 20 to 24-foot hulls with surprising authority. On lighter boats, it absolutely flew. These were the final chest-thumping outboards of a legendary brand. Loud, fast, slightly unhinged, and loved because of it. And that was the muscle era, a decade when outboards weren't just engines, they were characters. Loud, unpredictable, iconic, and fast enough to leave a mark on boating history that still hasn't faded. If you enjoyed diving into the chaos, the engineering, and the attitude of these legendary power plants, there's an entire world of stories just like this waiting for you. Hit the like button, drop a comment on which engine ruled your waters, and subscribe so you never miss the next deep dive into the machines that shaped modern boating. The next story starts when you're ready.